This is Conversation Balloons, a podcast of interviews with experts and friends about all things generational. I'm your host, Leah Farish. I'm excited to welcome to Conversation Balloons today my dear friend, Linda Shrewsbury. We go back. We go way back, don't we?
Yep, we do.
Well, thanks for coming on. We're going to be talking about how you have devised a system of teaching cursive writing that is just so amazing, so simple and ingenious. And let me give you a little background about Linda first. She's worn many hats.
Mm-hmm. Teaching hats.
Yes, absolutely. She's been involved in so many forms of education, homeschooling, childbirth education, classical schooling. She's been involved in our public schools here in Tulsa, been a university professor, taught in a village school in Tanzania.
English is a second language.
And she has her undergraduate degree, and she has a master's in international studies. So I don't usually ask this, Linda, but it's a precious story. I rarely ask people, how did you get into this? But it's an important vignette for us to start with.
Sure.
How did this evolve?
Yes, it began with a volunteer literacy program called Literacy and Evangelism International here in Tulsa. And I took the training to teach their method, and the director came to me and said, would you be willing to teach a young man who's 23 years old, has learning challenges, and really struggling to become a reader? And I realized that I had taught in so many venues, in so many different circumstances, and the one thing I had never done was to teach a special needs student. And so I thought, sure, I remember just having a sense of, wow, this is something you should do. And anyway, Josh, my student, was just a very special young man. I found this out later, that he'd had a severe injury when he was 8 years old. He was 23 at the time, so that had been about 15 years. But anyway, we started working on literacy, and we spent, I realized that working with him an hour a week might be a volunteer situation, but it wouldn't get Josh very far. So it turned out that we worked together twice a week, 2.5 hours on one session and then an hour and a half on a second session. And I thought that would help him make some progress. But one day he asked me if I would teach him cursive so he could sign his name. And I was so touched. I thought, oh my gosh, how do you teach a 23-year-old, not letter by letter, day by day for months? But I remember having a 5-word prayer, and it was, Lord, help me help Josh. And I went home and I thought, there's got to be a pattern in the alphabet somewhere that would be easier for Josh to understand than the traditional way of teaching cursive handwriting. I looked at the letters for a long time, and sure enough, a pattern emerged. I thought, I'm going to show this to Josh and see what happens. When I showed him the patterns, he was able to form the entire lowercase alphabet in 45 minutes. Oh. I showed him his initials, and he signed his name, and we were both stunned. So that was, I thought, wow, this is really something. So about a year later, it happened again with the 16-year-old, and that's when I thought, there's something intuitive about this, and I'm going to do something with it.
I'm so glad you did. Well, you have how many products now that are used in teaching cursive?
We have about 7 products at this point. We have the original workbook, which is it's Learn Cursive All Grades. And the thing about our method, you mentioned at the beginning, is simplicity. It's just all about the inherent structure of the cursive alphabet. There are no little pictures, no gimmicks, no games, just, clean sheets with learning cursive on it. But the method is basically the lowercase cursive alphabet divides very precisely into 4 groups based on shape. And we teach all the letters that share a common shape as a connected letter string. And those are our 2 innovations, the 2 features of Cursive Logic that are unique. It's letters grouped by shape and letters taught as a connected string. So with those 2 ideas, we have one workbook that teaches, and actually we started selling that workbook to pen collectors. They were our first market because they supported the Kickstarter that launched our company. And, they wanted good paper and, simplicity. And then when we started selling to schools, we realized we had to do a little bit more in terms of providing a teacher manual and practice workbooks that were kind of content related for grades 3, 4, and 5. Is what we have now. And then we came up with an adult coloring book called The Art of Cursive that teaches the method in an abbreviated form, and it's practiced on some very interesting coloring sheets that were created by our graphic artists, where the alphabet is kind of incorporated into the picture. So as you write the alphabet, you're creating the picture, and people really love it.
That's ingenious.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, adult coloring books are such a hot thing and a delightful pursuit, I think, for any age, really. You have gotten some wonderful endorsements, and I remember, was it a professor at A&M?
Yes,
Yep.
Professor at Texas A&M, Dr. William Clem. He's a neuroscientist there, and I had seen his name in some of the literature and writing about the importance of cursive handwriting. And so right before we launched the company, we thought, wouldn't it be great if we, we sent this to Dr. Clem and, well, let's just do it and see what happens. And so actually we wrote him email and said, we have this workbook, we'd really like you to review it. And we kind of thought, well, it's out there in the ether, It was less than 10 minutes. He wrote us back and said, yeah, I'll review your workbook for you. And 4 days later, he wrote a blog post in Psychology Today calling our workbook an intelligent new way to teach cursive handwriting. We loved it so much, we took that as our tagline. And he's just been a wonderful friend of Cursive Logic. He's, recommended it. He's written that he'd like to see it in every school in America. And we just hope that's prophetic.
Oh, absolutely. May it spread. Well, I was looking at an article in a 2020 Psychology Today issue, and it talked about how writing in cursive generally, not necessarily only with your program, but that it showed that by EEGs that it synchronized brain waves and stimulated the parietal lobe and the central region. And in scholastic.com, it said that using cursive writing was helpful with improving spelling and children were less likely to write backwards. And it even helped their syntax, which to me is amazing. I wouldn't think that would be related, but it certainly is. Have you found that nationwide people are starting to rediscover cursive in general? Is that important?
Absolutely. For many reasons, and the science and what they can see in terms of the impact on the brain definitely is part of it. A big driver is the way cursive handwriting helps dyslexic students and students with dysgraphia. Handwriting, the thing about cursive handwriting that's important is it's connected writing. Okay, the letters are connected, and so they flow together. And for that reason, when you write, you're writing by words, you're not writing by letter. And all of those things work into the development of language. So cursive handwriting really will be helpful to students in terms of their reading and just language development. In fact, to prepare for this talk today, I went back and looked at an article that I read very early on when we began, probably back in 2016. And it was, I loved discovering this article. It was called Digitizing Literacy. And it talked about the haptics of literacy. And that means there's the motor, the hand motions, and the actions that are part of literacy, because literacy is reading and writing a language. And
we tend to forget that.
We tend to forget that, and so with a lot of the new modalities that technology allows us to have, typewriters and that kind of thing, we've kind of broken those two things apart, so literacy is just reading or typing or whatever, but they're very much bound up together. And people who study something called embodied cognition, really study these kinds of things, how, the hand and the brain go together, and how they support learning, and, the learning supported by motion and feel and, sensory information and all of that is something that happens right from the moment of birth. Babies are born, and it's about feeling, and this is part of how they learn. And I think an important component of learning is handwriting. So when we take that away, I think that's really what we, the reading scores and just, some of the general education problems, I think really can come trace right back to handwriting, and making that an important emphasis.
Yeah, when I was teaching at the college level, I was really drilling down on the importance of taking notes in my class, and I was a little queasy about students who were on their laptop just keyboarding in the notes. A couple of them were strong students, but and they seemed to do okay with that. And different people learn differently, but I really urged them to take, copious notes. And they'd say, "We don't have time," or "My hand is getting tired," or I can't write all this down and listen at the same time. But I said, cursive, you need to be writing notes in cursive. You cannot print fast enough. This will not work. And they would insist that they could print faster than they could write cursive. And I'd say, cursive writing literally means running writing. It is much faster. And a few of them, made the transition, but by the time they're 18, 19 years old, that's a pretty ingrained habit, and it's unfortunate that they couldn't avail themselves of cursive in that context. I had a couple of students that all they knew how to do was print. They had never been taught cursive, and they were in, selective colleges. It was shocking to me.
Well, I think this is where the way we're teaching comes in, because students can literally pick this up in 4 weeks. They can become cursive writers in a way that really sticks, that really becomes an internal habit. In fact, one of the schools that we sell to is a private school in Texas, and one of the things that she wrote to kind of help us with the patent that we were filing for is that her students bring it back. They really internalize cursive handwriting so that, at the end of the school year, the following year, they actually bring it back and it becomes an internal habit. But I wanted to tell you about an article that came out probably 2014, and it was a study, and the title of the write-up was "The Pen is Mightier Than the Laptop."
Oh, yeah.
And, the study just showed that taking notes by hand it does something when students are taking notes on a laptop, they're basically transcribing, and they're just, kind of getting the information down. Whereas when you take notes by hand, you can't write everything, and so you tend to synthesize more, and you look for the main points, and you write those down. And so what they found is that not only did students have better recall of the information, but they had better comprehension of they displayed better comprehension in the follow-up testing.
I'm not at all surprised. Yeah. I think now, and this could be true theoretically for printing as well as for cursive, but as opposed to keyboarding, note-taking, when I would take notes, even as late as law school, I was arranging the writing on the page, and I would cluster ideas. I would subordinate ideas in my handwriting that I wouldn't have taken the time to do with spacing and all with keyboarding. It formats your brain. It formats your ideas because it is formatted by somebody else. And this way we're literally formatting our thoughts and formatting the inputting process. And of course you would remember that better. Of course you would grasp onto the ideas that you're writing about better. I read a 2020 piece from the Wall Street Journal that said, according to MRIs, it can improve idea composition and expression and develop fine motor skills, of course. That's one thing that boys always need work on more than girls, usually, in school. And this is the natural way to do that. And in fact, I'm not sure where else would boys get fine motor training unless it was with handwriting in a school setting.
Well, girls too, because they've taken home ec out, so you're not threading needles or anything.
No, they're
like
not.
That. So
yeah,
I think both of them need it.
Well, with all this empirical evidence, why were schools jettisoning cursive writing training at all?
It's a good question, and I think they're rethinking it. Because many states have mandated. Now, the mandates usually come from state legislatures where people are just kind of common sense. Somebody ought to be able to sign their name,
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's also the research is going along to show that it's an important support for a foundation for education. It's like I say, literacy is reading and writing.
Yeah.
And especially for younger children. I just, taking away something that's formative, and most students really want to do this. The teachers find that your second and third graders like the idea of learning handwriting and cursive handwriting. They're excited about it.
I get the feeling that a lot of teachers are not as excited.
Well, we find that they're excited with Cursive Logic, and not just to put a promo on it, but it is a typically, or the thing that teachers used to say was it takes too long to teach it. It's too time consuming, and we've totally
and it's not on the standardized tests, Linda.
Well, in Texas, it's back in the TEKS, the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. They put it back in.
Wow.
In 2017. And we actually, most of our business is in Texas. That's where we've really made headway. We would like to move into other states. And in fact, we actually are being considered for state adoption in Mississippi. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, sure. Well, can an individual school district go for it even without a state mandate?
Yes, and many do. One of an exciting story for us was a teacher in West Virginia who found us online, and she was very, felt handwriting was important, and she just, thought our method was going to do it for her students. So she tried so hard to get the school to, go with it, and it just wasn't happening. And I thought, someone this enthusiastic has got to have the books. So we tried a pilot with her. It's the first time we did a pilot. We provided the books for her class, and it was the year of COVID. So her students, the one stipulation we had was that if the students were going to be out of school, the books had to go home with them so they could continue. And her students ended up being in the classroom 30 days during the fall semester. And by the end of February, every single one was writing cursively.
Oh.
And all the other teachers were so amazed and like, we want this for our students. And the district bought it for everybody the following year.
I love that story.
So, yeah, it was really just one where, an enthusiastic teacher who just really wanted to see her students have this skill. And then she was able to do that for the entire district.
You mentioned dyslexia, which is such an important problem for schools to address. And I thought I would share a little story. Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever told you this. I was severely dyslexic when I was little, and there was no word for it at the time. Mm-hmm. It was called mirror writing, because if you held up my papers in a mirror, they were perfectly written. I didn't know I was doing it. I couldn't discern the difference between what I was writing and what another child was writing. It looked the same to me. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, my spelling was very good, which is kind of unusual. So I was didn't have a problem with sequencing the letters. I was having problems sequencing the motions of making the letters. Do I make the ball before the stick or the stick before the ball? And even now, in looking at printing, if I'm tired, a B and a D look interchangeable to me. And we said in my family, the narrative was she just grew out of it. It started to go away in second grade. Third grade, I started learning cursive, and it completely went away. And I am only now realizing that is probably what changed the game for me, was writing in cursive. I didn't have that problem. For some reason, had no problem discerning the difference in cursive letters and the orientation of left and right, and in forming those letters. I can't explain it. I'm sure some scientists can.
And they, the dyslexia interventionists and therapists and so forth just do a wonderful job with that. But this has actually been our opening in many schools at this point, because of the impact that handwriting has for dyslexic students, and then having a way of doing that's simple, effective, and fast. We are finding that we are getting into schools at kind of the back doorway. We'd like to be in general education, but when dyslexia therapists discover us, that usually is our backdoor entrance into schools.
That's amazing. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Kind of ironic, huh? Mm-hmm. I was reading in 2012, there was a study of 12-year-olds and young adults, and it found that memory and encoding new information was helped with cursive, and that it activates a unique, what they called reading circuit in the brain. And like you said, literacy is writing and reading. It isn't just reading. And we don't fully understand this literacy circuit, I don't think, but
there's a lot that's understood about it, a lot. And I brought At this point, I spend a lot of time with just kind of more of the business aspects of my business. But at the beginning, I had put together a pretty long list of studies that had been written. This is 2 pages here that I
Wow.
thought I'd bring to you. And I actually had the chance to talk to some of these people about the research they were doing. And in fact, the one I mentioned to you, the digitizing literacy, it was actually a researcher in France and one in Sweden. And I got to have some kind of email correspondence with them because I wanted to, introduce my method and see if they would be interested. There wasn't much follow through. But there was a doctor who'd written a book called The Hand. And his thesis was that the hand plays such an important part in the intellectual and cognitive development, and that, if you try to talk about the brain without talking about the hand, you're really missing something. There was a lot more to it, obviously, than that, but it was Dr. Wilson. And I actually got to have a conversation with him, but he was about to retire, and he said, I'm kind of leaving this to younger people now. But I do have that article from Dr. Clem with me here. He talked about the fact that over 50 years ago, there was such a thing as a penmanship teacher. And do schools have that today? And he really laments the loss of handwriting, but said that as my perspective, as a neuroscientist, I believe that learning cursive is developmentally beneficial for a young developing brain. Learning cursive provides a crucial benefit to children at any age, or at an age when they need it most: a sense of involvement and ownership, eye-hand coordination, and patience and self-control. And this is the one the headmistress I was telling you about at a school called Geneva School of Burney, and she just had a few students who were literally were referred to her, 4 boys who were referred to her because their handwriting was illegible. And she said she decided to implement Cursive Logic as an after-school tutoring subject, and the results were stunning. They were eager to come. They really enjoyed the process, and their handwritings just improved tremendously. So one of the boys who had the worst handwriting, actually, he won an award, and it really changed the trajectory of his schooling and education to gain that skill of handwriting.
Absolutely. I love that. I came across a verse in the Bible the other day. Actually, I had heard a German scholar named Thomas Schirmacher talk about this verse when I was at a conference in Germany. And it came to my mind the other day what he was saying. It's Deuteronomy 17:18. And it says, it's a mandate for kings, all royalty. When he takes the throne of his kingdom, he is to write for himself on a scroll a copy of this law, taken from that of the Levitical priests. And why do you think it might be that this Hebrew scripture mandates that a king should write the Levitical law
I think it gives the
for
reason in
himself?
there. Doesn't it say why God commands it? I think that's the following verse.
Oh, okay. We'll read on. It is to be with him, and he is to read it all the days of his life, so that he may learn to revere the Lord his God and follow carefully all the words of this law and these decrees, and not consider himself better than his fellow Israelites, and turn from the law to the right or the left. Then he and his descendants will reign a long time over his kingdom in Israel.
He's supposed to do that because there's something about writing and memory and reinforcement that go together. And there's actually a set of journals that are based on it's called the Deuteronomy 17:18 project, where the Bible has been written out into a series of open journals. They've pasted out and put the verses out so that you can write any book of the Bible out by hand, and they're called journables by the Deuteronomy 17:18 project.
Oh.
I discovered that about 2 years into this, and I actually have some, and my student Josh, I gave him one, and he actually began journaling the scripture, the book of John. So yeah, it's just a powerful way to reinforce and to commit to kind of your long-term understanding, the scriptures, and just anything that you write, but particularly the scriptures here. It's become my practice. I journal, and primarily it's writing scripture that, the Lord has quickened to my heart. And I feel that this is one of the very personal ways, that handwriting can impact our lives.
That's rich. I think it really personalizes it. It personalizes anything that you write, and it invites, a meditation on it and application of the content of it to your own life.
Yeah, I was going back over my journals actually just the last week or so, and I found one place where I'd written, this page typed would be so much less me than in my handwriting.
So true.
Yeah.
Do you have any particular concerns about how Black students are doing in the public school system? And do any of your resources particularly, do you think, motivate Black students?
I would say that, these resources motivate students. I just see this handwriting as something that's a universal, and it's going to impact any student that picks it up and is using it. It's interesting. I mean, Josh was a young Black man, but he just happened to be the fellow who was, who I was tutoring. One of my early tutees was a Down syndrome young man who his mom wanted him to have some help, and she just could not believe the kind of progress he was able to make in a short time. Cursive Logic kind of spans the spectrum. Students, I remember some of the 4 of the first young ladies that used the program. They were in a after-school program in Mississippi. These 4 beautiful young women, lively. They were Black girls, but in terms of any emphasis or direction for the program, I wouldn't say I see anything more than helping this generation. Oh, I saw a great meme today. A friend sent it to me. I want to show it to you. And just take the time, as this might be something that actually stimulates. This is really good, actually. She sent it to me just today.
They don't know how to read cursive.
Talking about Gen Z.
They don't know how to read a paper map. They can't get anywhere unless there's a GPS map on their phone. All I'm saying is if Gen Z takes over the world, it's going to be pretty easy to get it back.
This is the hard part's coming up. Yeah. No. This is the part I want you to see.
Story. We talked about it before.
Look at her face.
Where, well, so there's that story where they did the war game and the younger guys lost to the older guys, and it feels like the older guys wrote their plans on a note and put it in a guy's pocket and wrote it by motorcycle, and they were trying to intercept messages. People talk about it. They tell us the specifics. But Isabel then goes on to mention that you were supposed to teach us.
Yeah.
And that's the most brutal thing about it. That woman, she's telling a joke. It's fine. It's a joke.
Okay, that's the part that I wanted you to see. What he said. It's like, yeah, we can tell jokes about it, but we're the ones who've kind of dropped the ball. It's like, why make fun of the kids? We're the ones who are responsible for teaching them this, and we haven't done it.
We're culpable in so many ways.
I
Oh,
know.
don't get me started.
I know. Well, it's just one of them. But I feel very blessed and very privileged, and feel like, wow, the Lord has given me a mission that I can just really, throw myself into to make sure this skill isn't lost on the next generation. To just kind of bring it back into schools and make it easy. And I feel like this is one of the things that we can do. We can make it engaging and fun and easy to gain this very important and practical skill for students. And I love that. And
you have some resources that have like inspirational quotes that people can copy. Tell me about that.
Oh, and this is one of the things I absolutely just really thrills me. Okay, the practice workbooks that we developed, well, the first one is called Poems, Rhymes, and Songs, and it's full of patriotic songs from our history and, just things that have been traditional, things that we've passed on to young people, but the songs in it, the anthems. I think there's a Woody Guthrie song in there, This Land is Your Land, This Land is My Land. Just different things that students ought to have cultural familiarity with. And then the second book is called Presidents and Citizens. And that is actually based on the 50 states and when they came into to the Union, as part of the United States. But it also has a president from a state, if it's a presidential birthplace, and there were 20 of those. Virginia had 8 presidents from Virginia. We only used the first one. And then if the state did not have a president born there, we used a famous citizen. And so we were able to use people like Frederick Douglass and the Wright brothers, just a list of important people. But my absolute favorite workbook is the one called Speeches and Writings in American History. And that is 18 great Americans and the things that they said, excerpts from their writings or books or whatever. And it starts with Patrick Henry, give me liberty or give me death. And Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson, the Declaration of Independence, Abraham Lincoln, the Gettysburg Address, Frederick Douglass, Call to Arms, Men of Color, Call to Arms. There's Rosa Parks, John F. Kennedy, Ronald Reagan, Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall. Just important things in our history that students can become aware of. And the thing I like is that they are actually writing the words from these people. And I think there's just a way in which you empathize. It creates empathy. It creates just a feeling of walking in that person's shoes.
Yes,
to actually
identifying with those words.
Be doing copy work based on their writings and the things that were important to them. Eleanor Roosevelt is in there, Marian Anderson, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, just important people. And, when we were revising that book, it's one of the revisions we did this spring, a young girl, a 5th grader who had actually gone through the book, said, I really liked the book, but I wish she had more women in it. And so the 2 new profiles that we incorporated were 2 women, Eleanor Roosevelt and Marian Anderson. And it really did kind of flesh out the book. I just feel like it will give students a real way to tap into American history.
That's beautiful. Linda, you're just one of the most beautiful people in my life, and I thank you so much for coming and joining us on Conversation Balloons.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Now, if people want to find your input or your products, where should they go?
CursiveLogic.com.
They will do that.
They will find it right there. Cursive Logic, CursiveLogic, one word, and .com.
I hope you go in droves, audience. Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Subscribe and review Conversation Balloons on your favorite podcast platform. Find me at leahfarish.com and on Instagram at LeahFarish.